All right, so we've all been there, right? You're in the middle of a presentation and you can literally see people's eyes glazing over. It's a horrible feeling. Well, today, we're going to fix that for good. We're going to dive into the key techniques that'll turn any talk you give into something people actually remember, from your very first word right down to the last.
Seriously, just imagine this for a second. You finish your presentation and you just know you crushed it. The audience isn't just politely clapping, they're actually getting it. They remember your main points, they got the value you were trying to give. That's the feeling we're going for here. So let's break down a framework that's going to make sure your message doesn't just get heard, it actually sticks.
Okay, first things first, we have to talk about grabbing their attention, specifically in those first 30 seconds. Look, this part is absolutely critical. It's not just about getting them to stop scrolling on their phones for a minute, it's about earning their attention for the entire presentation. If you nail this beginning, trust me, the rest of your talk gets a whole lot easier. So, what's the secret? How do you actually do it? Well, we're going to steal a trick from the absolute masters of suspense, mystery writers. Think about it. What do? They put a question in your head, an itch you have to scratch. You just have to know what happens next. And that is exactly your goal in a presentation. You want to create that same feeling, making your audience lean in, just dying to get the answer. Now, the good news is you don't need to be some kind of famous novelist to pull this off. There are actually proven, practical ways to hook your audience. So let's dive into 4 really powerful techniques you can use right away. All right, hook number 1 is the provocative question. It's super effective. When you start with something like, how can we double our sales? Or what would we have to do to achieve this goal? You're not just talking at them, you're immediately putting a challenge out there. It gets a question spinning in their head, you know? They start thinking, yeah, how are we going to do that? And just like that, they're on the journey with you, waiting for the solution.
Okay, hook number 2, the story. This one is so good. It's kind of sneaky in the best way. You start off real casual, saying something like, before I jump in, I wanted to tell you a quick story about. It feels like you're going off script, just sharing a little personal thing. And once you've got them hooked on your anecdote, you hit them with the pivot. And that's when it hit me. Or that's when I realized. Bam! You've just seamlessly connected a personal story right to the main point of your entire presentation. It's brilliant.
And here's a perfect example of what that looks like in action. Imagine you're giving a talk on motivation at work. Instead of starting with a boring statistic, you say, my son is a total domino maniac. Everyone can picture that, right? It's human, it's relatable, and then you make the turn. And watching him, that's when I realized that real motivation is tied to a sense of playfulness. See what happened? A simple, everyday story just became this powerful metaphor for your main topic. It's just so effective. Hook number 3 is the situation. This one is all about being right there in the moment with your audience. You use something you all share right then and there. Maybe it's the room you're in, or something the previous speaker said, or even the terrible coffee you all had. By pointing it out, you instantly show that you're not a robot reading a script. You're a real person in the same room, having the same experience. It builds that connection, that rapport, like instantly. And last but not least, hook number 4, humor. Now, this one could be a total game changer, but you got to do it right. The biggest mistake people make is trying to tell a forced, scripted joke. It almost always falls flat and it's super awkward. The key is to stick to good humor. Make a little fun of the situation you're all in, or even poke fun at your own material. It feels natural, it feels witty. Remember, the goal isn't to be a stand-up comic. It's just to be a relatable human being. All right, so you've done it. You've hooked them and they're actually paying attention. Awesome. But now what? The next big challenge is making sure you don't lose them as you move through your points. And this is where having super smooth transitions becomes your secret weapon. And honestly, it's not as hard as it sounds. There's this brilliantly simple 3-part formula that works every time. Think of these phrases as like verbal signposts for your audience. You tell them where you're going, you tell them when you've arrived, and then you tell them where you're headed next. It makes your entire presentation so easy for them to follow along. So here's how the pattern works, and it's super straightforward. You only use that start topic phrase one time, right at the beginning of your first main point. After that, it's just a simple rinse and repeat cycle. You use step 2 to wrap up the point you just finished, and then step 3 to introduce the next one. That's it. This rhythm creates this really clean, really organized flow that your audience will subconsciously appreciate. It keeps them right there with you. Okay, we've talked about how to start strong and how to guide people through the middle. Now we get to maybe the most important part of your whole talk, ending with impact. This is it. This is your last chance to make sure your message doesn't just fade away.
And there's actually some cool brain science that explains why this is so important. It's called the primacy recency effect. Basically, our brains are just wired to remember two things best: the first thing we hear and the last thing we hear. Everything in the middle can get a little fuzzy. So your conclusion isn't just a way to say bye. It's your prime time slot to cement your key ideas in their memory.
So how do you trigger that pay attention now mode in your audience? It's simple. You use a crystal clear phrase like this one. When you say, "And that brings me to the end of my presentation," it's like a bell goes off in their heads. It's a signal that says, "Okay, listen up, the most important stuff is coming right now." It perfectly tees up your final summary.
And after you've said that magic phrase, your job is simple, but it is so vital. You just state your key points one last time, and that's it. This is not the time for new information. Don't add any extra stories or complicated details. It's just a clean, powerful recap of the absolute core message you want them to walk away with. So, when you boil it all down, what's the big takeaway? It's this. A truly great presentation is just a well-told story. It needs a killer opening that pulls you in, a clear middle that doesn't let you get lost, and a powerful ending that you just can't forget. When you use these techniques, you stop just sharing information and you start crafting an actual experience for your audience. So the question for you is, for your next story, what will your first and last lines be?